Whoa, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the 505 interview series. Big D coming to you live from the 505 Summer Lounge, aka the Sweltering Hell Lounge. Damn, it was hot today. Not been spoiled with all this cool, rainy, wet weather that it's hot and I don't like it. And I want it to go back to where it was before. So, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us tonight. Very special show. Tonight is more of an educational show. I've got two guys who are very successful podcast hosts. They are educators of fine spirits, and they're going to help me learn a little bit into the spirit world tonight. And I figured, I've got a lot of questions about spirits and testing and drinking and all this, that if I have those questions, there's probably a lot of people out there who also still have those questions as well. So these guys will be able to answer them because they're constant professionals out there. And I see some people already jumping in. Miss Michelle, what's up, beautiful? Oh, I love seeing your face pop up on my screen. Joe, what's going on, my friend? How are you? So tonight, that's what it's going to be. I'm going to get myself learnt, and I'm going to get by two of the best from the Bourbon Battalion, Bobby Williams, Zach Andrews. Let's bring them on.
Hey.
Welcome, gentlemen.
Cheers, brother.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Yeah, excellent. So I will hand it over to you guys to introduce yourselves and what it is your programming and what your education is all about.
All right, well, I'll start off. I'm Bobby, Bourbon Battalion. That came to be, during the COVID extravaganza. Me and my brother had been smoking and drinking for about 25 years. And we found that there was a lot of people out there drinking and talking, but nobody was teaching. Nobody was helping people find their own palate. And he encouraged me to start my own channel, which was educational focused. And it's kind of, it's evolved. It's went from not only teaching whiskey, but teaching cigars, and then how to pair to that. And I do have my bourbon stewardship. I'm a whiskey saving thief guy. I've been an ambassador for multiple distilleries, and I'm in the process of opening my own whiskey lounge. So, but my job is just that, right? I'm here to help educate so someone can have a better experience.
Hey guys, how's everybody? Zach Andrews. So Bobby and I found each other by way of a mutual friend. It just so happened that we hit it off, and we come at this thing that we call whiskey and cigars from two different views, but somehow we seem to end up at the same intersection. We both enjoy allowing that person to have that first aha moment. And if we can facilitate that, then we've done our job. And that's basically what our job is. Our job, like Bobby said, is to educate. We're not there to judge. Listen, I don't care what you want to drink, what you want to drink it with. I'm just there to help you have a little bit of a better experience. So, yep. Danny, thanks again for having us on.
Oh, man, I appreciate you guys coming on. So I as I've stated, I don't know much, if at all, anything about spirits or the spirit world. And so you want me to break down tobacco, I can do that for you. Easy peasy. But this stuff, I got no clue about it. People hand me drinks all the time when we're out at places or events. And then it's like, do you like it? And I'm like, well, yeah, sure. But I honestly don't know what I should be looking for when I'm smelling or tasting. What's good quality, what's not. What I should be doing. And I thought, well, if I don't know a lot of this stuff, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people out there as well who don't as well. So maybe they would like to also get an education with me as well. So if you're watching, grab yourself your favorite bottle of brown liquor and come join us.
And listen, the great thing about this is a process for really starting to drink your spirit neat. This process works for tequila, rum, bourbon, Scotch, rye, whatever it is, cognac, Armagnac, you can use this process. That is why I think that we've been universally kind of accepted, is that this process isn't just you only like bourbon, cool, go for it. If you only like Scotch, listen, it still works. If you like tequila, it still works. So I'm going to turn it over to Bobby to kind of go into the teaching aspect, because he's my play-by-play guy. I'm the color guy.
All right.
Yeah. So, the first thing is that there's no wrong way to drink your whiskey or something like that, but there are ways of having a better experience. And the reason why we say, hey, you want to start neat, well, you want to start neat to find your palate, first of all. You have to go through and get to the point of acclimating your palate to find what you like and why. Once you find that and you say, hey, I may need to add water, I may want it with Coke, I may want it with something, but we got to find what it is to you to start. And that's where you have to have a really good palate acclimation. So I'm going to walk you through a palate acclimation. And Zach, he'll be my color play, and we'll walk through it. So the first thing you want to do is, put it in your glass, whatever one. Most people would say, like a tulip-shaped glass, like a Glencairn or whatever. Really, it's whatever you got. That'll work. Perfect. It doesn't, it matters later. In the beginning, not so much, right? Because you're trying to find your palate. We'll just start with that. So.
There's a question that came up right now. If you would explain the word.
Oh, explain neat. So neat is whiskey at room temperature, straight from the bottle, straight to your glass. That's it. No ice, no cold, no refrigerator. Room temperature whiskey, straight to your glass. Nothing added.
Okay.
Is neat. Now, there's all kinds of different terms you might hear, but for right now, we're talking neat.
Okay,
Just
so pop the
spirit in a glass.
Pop the cork on this.
Yep. Pull that.
Okay. Cork popped.
Yeah, and just pour yourself a little bit, about a finger,
one
about a
finger.
finger's worth. When I go through a palate acclimation, I usually have about this much.
Perfect.
Yep, that's about right. Yep, no more than that.
Okay.
Because the thing is, right, so you always, what you're trying to do is you're engaging your olfactory, your nose, and that with your palate, which is your tongue and your mouth, but also the back end of your olfactory, right? So it's proper to go through there and start getting accustomed to it. So a lot of times you'll hear people talk about nosing it, right? Nosing it doesn't mean you're diving into it. Not in the beginning. You may do that later when you get really familiar with it. But in the beginning, you want the evanescence of it to come up. It's kind of like you would have that great smell that comes into your nose with a retro inhale. We're trying to find the same thing with whiskey.
Okay.
Right? So what you're going to do is just gently put it at the bottom of your nose. Let it come up. Don't tip your nose into it. Keep your mouth slightly open and just get a good smell. Not a big swip, just a smell, and say, okay, what's it smell like to you? Right? Is it, got whatever notes, right? You won't hear me saying any notes, because I want you to find your palate.
If you're not smelling it, you can put it closer to your nose.
A lot of times you get a better nose with your mouth slightly open because it creates like a little vacuum.
So it has kind of like there's kind of a sweet, grainy smell. Is kind of what I get off of that.
That would be expected. Now that sweet, what does that sweet remind you of? Is it like a candy sweet, a fruit sweet, a sugar sweet?
It's like a baking sugar kind of sweetness.
Okay.
Where it's not like it's overly sweet, but
yeah,
something that you would use to bake with, more so,
right.
Instead of eat.
Perfect. So what I want you to do is I want you to take a sip. Now, it's really important about this. Your first sip is really small, like it's the hottest shit you've ever drank in your entire life.
Okay.
And I want you to keep it in the center of your tongue. Don't let it go over the edges. And when you're ready, just take it down gently. When you swallow it down. When you breathe back out your mouth. So it's just going to be a real simple, little bitty thing. You're going to let it roll, and then once it goes down, out your mouth. The reason why you do your first one or two out the mouth is, one, I'm trying not to trigger my olfactory up in my sinuses with the ethanol. If I do, I could cause my sinuses to swell, and your tear ducts will start to, and it will start losing taste because you've affected your olfactory. So in the beginning, you want to take that. Also, it kind of lets it open up that the bouquet will gently rise to your, you will smell it in the back, but it gives this thing. So on the front of your palate, in the middle of your palate, is your sweet ring, is where you're sweet to bitter, right? Not your bitters, but you start going like the sweet, you get a sweet note and all that stuff, and then it'll go back to what we call a finish. So shouldn't have been terrible off, but you might got a little warmness in your chest, but that's normal. That's called a hug, right?
Yes.
But not horrible, right?
No. This is very nice.
Now this time you're going to do the exact same thing. Nothing's going to change.
Okay.
Same thing. Now you're going to notice progression-wise, it's going to get a little bit less hot. It's going to start, you're going to start tasting more, right? The reason why you take the small sips is because you're using your full tongue, right? Because you're not oversaturating your tongue across different flavor. You have sweets, you have bitters, you have all these different areas, regions of your palate that have different flavor profiles. So if you go with a big drink, sometimes you don't really get anything because it's just too overwhelming.
Yes.
It's too much to compute.
And I think that's been my problem in the past, is that I, never allowed my tongue or palate to acclimate to what it was I was drinking.
And don't ever, like when you're doing a palate acclimation, don't introduce anything during it. No water, no cigars, nothing, because you're really just trying to find this. Because the nice thing is, if you do this prior to a cigar, then you can say, hey, what is this missing? What do I think would go with this?
Okay.
And then, because that gives you that. Now, this one's going to be the worst. I usually tell anybody when I have them in their tasting events and that stuff, I say, listen, this is going to be garbage. This is going to be the worst thing you've had all day. You're going to take a little bit bigger sip, and you're going to gently massage it around your tongue, underneath your tongue, around the sides of your tongue. You should expect that your tongue is going to feel tingly, a little bit numb on the sides. That's all normal. But when you drink it down, breathe out your mouth again. This will be the worst. What you're doing is you're activating actually one of the areas that you have the best profile for whiskey is the side of your tongues, back in the finish. You start pulling all these oak notes, but your first couple times, it's harsh. You're just like, whoa. Keep your mouth open every now and then. Usually I'll tell someone to breathe in their nose, out their mouth.
That's all right. I mean,
that's normal. That's normal.
Like at that point, like you felt a little bit of it kind of went up and hit the back of went up through the nostrils, hit the olfactory a little bit. Yeah.
So what you want to
that's really
breathe
good.
in your nose, out your mouth, in your mouth, out your nose. Alternate them.
Okay.
We do that on purpose.
Okay.
The reason why you're doing that is you're bringing that smell into the olfactory, right? When you breathe in your mouth and out your nose, you're coming up, because I don't want it from the drink itself. I want it from what's went down. I want the evanescence of it, right? So you should naturally, is the tongue the numb area and tingly starting to go away, right?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Right. So now, realistically, you're pretty close to acclimated. What you could do at this point, after you've talked a little bit and breathed a little bit, and that numbness goes away, and you feel okay, you should be able to just take a normal sip and do whatever you want with it, and it will taste better than it ever did. You'll notice more on the smell, and you'll be able to find your notes, things that it tastes like to you. So you can just have a regular sip.
Okay, I got just a little bit left, so I'll just go ahead and finish that off.
Yep. And don't be afraid to let it go anywhere, because you're going to have to figure that stuff. Just make sure that you recognize all those different areas because now they're not going to be nearly as harsh.
Like I say, I definitely am getting the moisture buildup in the mouth.
Yes.
It's really
Drool bucket.
Oh, that's great. No,
but
I mean,
what you can tell though, right? You get that on that back
Yes.
side of your tongues, right? Because you've activated but you're pulling all kinds of flavors now, and you're tasting, and it's not so harsh.
no, not
So
harsh at all, and very good.
so from the initial nosing to now, what would you say the flavor profile for you is?
Yeah, go to your nose. Back to your glass and nose.
I'm-
It's better to always nose it when there's nothing in it. You'll smell so much more.
So, there's definitely that. There's that definite kind of like baking sweetness off of that. Now on the palate, I pick up cinnamon, I pick up brown sugar, I pick up some light oak coming through, and there's something else there that's got it's like a caramel almost. Is kind of what I
Burnt
would
caramel?
put it at. Maybe
Burnt
like a
caramel?
burnt caramel, and that's really hitting off of this, really off the side of the tongue here,
Yeah.
which is really
Yeah.
making me
Salivate,
that
yeah.
drool.
Salivate.
Yes.
Yeah.
that
So a lot
caramel.
of times that spice that you get on the back side of your tongue to give you that is a lot of the barrel spice. A lot of times you're pulling barrel spice from the back sides of your tongue, which is different than like what you would have like on a rye or something on the middle of your tongue. It's going to be a lot more of like baking spices, where this is kind of like it's a grainy, that wood comes into play with it, and you get this barrel spice that comes out of it. So you get that, but those notes all line up with what you're drinking, because we know ahead of time. You were talking about the mash bill of your drink, right?
Yes.
So read me the mash bill of that, and then we'll talk about mash bill.
Sure. So the mash bill here. So the mash bill is 60%, corn 20%, and malted white wheat 20%.
Is that malted
Say that
barley?
again.
It says malted white wheat.
Malted wheat, 60%
What
corn.
was before the wheat?
Yeah, what was before the wheat?
Oh,
Really?
corn, malted white wheat, and malt.
Malt.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's when they say
Malted
malt,
barley.
they mean malted barley.
Barley. Yeah.
Okay.
So malt is. So when you hear single malt Scotch, right? You hear that. Doesn't mean have anything to do with talking about the grains. The single means it's one distillery. The
Right.
grain is only malted barley. That's why they call it a single, one distillery, all malt. If it was something else, they would call it blended, right?
Okay.
But with this one,
So-
you have you
so-
would have is a Wyoming straight bourbon.
Okay.
So with
Yes.
it being a white straight bourbon, we know that in order to be a bourbon, it must have at least 51% corn. And we know this one has 60.
60.
Now, typically behind that, you're going to have various other components, either wheat, rye, malted barley, are your signature three that you're going to have behind that. Now, there can
But
be
that's
variations of strains, of types of wheat, of types of barley. You can have a lot of stuff, but one of the things that wouldn't shock me to find when I heard you have a 20% malted barley behind it, I instantly started thinking with wheat, you start getting notes of like cocoa or chocolate or something like that can make a presence. It doesn't mean they're going to, but for some people they can. That sweet, a lot of times that sweet is what's coming from the corn. That corn is doing it along with what's happening in the barrel, but the corn is your sweet one, right? That's why bourbon is typically sweet, because it's majority corn. So when you start getting those notes, you start drinking it, then you can start pulling it. But you don't have to be trying to get the notes that's on the bottle or even jump to a flavor wheel right away. The first thing you need to find, and Zach and I talk about it often, is that everybody has a different heritage. So you're going to have things that you've ate or had from wherever you're from that are going to trigger. You know, like I can remember the first time I had a note of sugar smacks, which makes sense, right? There's a little bit of caramel on a toasted oat. You know, you're talking about grain. So anything's the correct answer. There is no wrong answer to your notes. It's just, it gives you an opportunity to figure out what it is. But now, since you're acclimated, I would say, you know, take a nice little sip, go in there, find the flavor it is to you, concentrate it a little bit around your palate because it ain't going to burn or be numb now, and say, okay, now what does this feel like it would taste good with when I talk about leaf?
Okay. The one thing I found interesting as we were going through this exercise was that cinnamon, it started out as like that hard red candy cinnamon like your grandma has in her purse is kind of really the feel I got. Then it started evolving into more of like a cinnamon spice. Like if I went to my spice rack and I took a dabble of cinnamon and put it on my tongue.
Absolutely.
And that's just the
that's a total acclimation. That's from the initial. It was, you know, those cinnamon like red hots are like really bright. You know what I mean? When you think about it, the flavor, it like the second you put it in your mouth, it just boom. It's like cinnamon hot. You know. After a while, when you're used to them and you're eating them all the time, that first one you put. Oh, okay. You know, it's a much more nuanced cinnamon versus, you know, this bright, hot cinnamon, and that totally makes sense. You know, Bobby mentioned it before. That generally is a characteristic of, you know, the barrel spices, especially hits you back here, you know, in the back and sides of your palate. When it hits you up front, that's usually going to be a rye spice, which is indicative of the mash bill. So,
it's all. And that's usually a signature thing that, you know, like when we do blind tasting and that stuff, you try to figure out, hey, where am I picking up notes? Because that tells me if I'm picking it up in the back end of my palate, then I'm getting it from the barrel. If I'm getting it in the middle, then I'm pulling it a rye. I just then have to decide, is it more spice or is it more sweet? To say, is it a bourbon with a high rye? Or is it a rye with a high corn? So either way, right? So
do you see Joe's question? Will you explain?
Barrel spice.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So okay, a lot of people don't realize this, right? When you look at whiskey, right, and you look at it and it's brown, right? That is not made that way. That's what comes from the barrel. Now, that comes from a charring process that they do in the barrel. There's chars and there's toasts. There's a bunch of different levels. Typically, people run in that 3 to 4 level char where they actually burn the barrels on the inside, get a really heavy char, and they'll do like a 3 or 4 level char. They can go up to 5, but you don't see that very often. Now, they also have a toasting. The easiest way to explain this is like think of toasting a marshmallow. There's those people that are super anal retentive that want their thing perfectly brown but not on fire, and it's got to be just yummy. That's toasted. Same thing happens with a barrel. They toast it without charring it. Where that person that's a morbid human being that likes to set their marshmallows on fire and eat them black, that's a char. I'm that guy. I am morbid. I want it to be just
I was about to say.
I love it charred. So but with those things, if you think about, if you were to taste, Danny, a toasted barrel, you would get that note from a toasted marshmallow. It's very signature. That's why so many people try to get them, because it's a light, nice, sweet spice that comes with it. So that spice that you're pulling from the barrel is a combination of the cooperage, which is the barrel staves and the wood and how it's created, And are they using the same staves? Are they doing a combination of different stave projects? So they're pulling flavor profiles out of different wood, and then how they're charring them and how they're aging them. So there's all kinds of complicated things that go into getting to the profile someone wants. But barrel spice comes from the wood and how it's been put together, and then also the charring.
And also from the particular species of the wood, the tighter the grain, the more spice it's going to give you.
Yep.
So I can
Exactly,
say,
Joe.
based upon what so far on what I've been the taste on this, because you asked me what did I think would go with this on there, or what type of tobacco. I definitely think something that comes across a bit more on the milder chocolatey side would be a very good cigar to pair with this, based upon the how that cinnamon really hits right up front, that caramel, how that caramel just sits in the my pockets right here.
Right.
I think adding in at that kind of not a sweet chocolatey type cigar would really kind of blend well with this, and maybe something that also has a little bit of leatheriness as well.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I
and
think
that's
that's
the thing,
spot
right?
on.
Everybody finds their process. But when you do, you'll notice that taste comes into the cigar, and together they start marrying. And that drool is so important. When we talk about the salivation in the back, well, you take a sip, right? So what I would tell you to do, right? You just started on your cigar. Take a sip. I'll do it with you. We're going to take a sip of our whiskey.
Okay.
Let it do its thing. Smell it, taste it, get that flavor profile. You see how all that saliva had there? Don't swallow that. Try not to swallow it right away.
Okay.
Because you want the smoke of your tobacco to get caught in it.
All right.
Because think of it as a rain cloud, right? We're
Okay.
trying to create a savory cloud to taste with it, because after a while it's going to start getting really tacky. Right now it's really runny, but it's going to start getting thick. Once it gets to that point that your tongue starts to feel a little dry and it starts to get tacky, and it might take a while, then reintroduce a little sip again, and then you'll start seeing what it tastes like together.
Okay.
Because, Zach and I have seen too many times someone will sit there with this and they'll smoke, drink. And I was like, whoa, you're just
Joe,
washing everything away.
Joe, I kid you not, drool. Dude, I'm about ready to let it fly down my shirt right now.
I'm not saying you can't get rid of some of it, obviously, but you just want to keep that tackiness back there, because it comes into play when you're trying to pair a whiskey and cigar together to get the taste of what they are together. It does take time, but if you really watch, I mean, if someone actually sat back and watched when Zach and I are just talking and doing all this stuff, very rarely are we going to our whiskey. You only go to your whiskey
unless I'm having a good time.
Yeah, unless we're doing dumb shit, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless
Joe,
I'm having a good time.
I think you're right. The Alabama Rose. I think the Alabama Rose would go very well with this whiskey.
Oh yes, it does. I've had the Alabama Rose. Now I can tell you, for me, the Alabama Rose went really, really, really good with a finished rye. It was amazing with a finished rye because it was such a dark. The Alabama Rose was so dark and had that big, heavy thickness to it. The rye spices came in really nice and played with it great.
I really like that sweetness. That smell is very nice.
But that comes back to the fact that we acclimated your palate gently. We didn't oversaturate your olfactory. You're able to smell things that you wouldn't have if you'd have taken just a big drink and burn out. And that's what usually people do. They don't take that entry. A lot of times I'll tell someone, I was like, hey, drink your whiskey like you're drinking orange juice after you brush your teeth. You know it's going to be garbage, but it's going to come into orange juice. You know, take your time. Yeah, and don't be afraid to like let it marry and taste. Then you can see what it tastes like together. And to me, it's important that every now and then I make sure I keep my mouth a little bit open. I breathe. Sometimes I breathe in my mouth, out my nose. Sometimes I do both. I do vice versa. I just want to try to look like Bobby.
Oh,
What a looks at what?
You look like
He
Chalk
looks at
while
Chalk.
he said that.
Yeah.
Bobby looks at Chalk while he said that. Because listen, she was honestly, she was our first guinea pig. Like, she was the first one, and
Well, she was the first
she
one that did
messaged
it
Bob.
and didn't want to. She was the first one that
Yeah,
had been
she
really like
she
we've talked to people
did.
that wanted to. She wanted to. It just took her the right time to do it.
She was so reluctant. She was like, "I'm just gonna drink my drink and smoke my cigars and
Yep.
and you know, when she slowed down just a little bit, you know, she had that little quiet moment, and she slowed down and she just kind of did everything, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, the difference! You know, the difference in the experience. You know, slowing down while appreciating, you know, all these bottles that she had bought, and she was proud of these things, but I think she was of them when she started to really appreciate them. That turned into her slowing down on her cigars,
Yeah.
and now it just wasn't a smoke just to hang out and do something. Like, she was really getting her money's worth, you know, and that's the whole thing. We just want everybody to sit, enjoy your time. If you find something new, you know, and Danny, this is like the first, you know, the first time. There's this plethora of flavors and things
Oh.
out there. I mean, we won't even go into the difference of American whiskeys versus, you know, versus Japanese whiskeys versus
Yeah, we can't go down that
Indian
road
whiskeys.
tonight.
I mean, like it's you know, I mean, you're you know,
I think you've already
the
created
same.
a new obsession for me. And
Well, I
I
think
just got I just got started, and I already feel that obsession tingle hitting.
yeah.
That's
Well, you
it.
know, I think the thing is, right, you know, the thing that made me so proud of Chalk is one, she trusted us to do it with her, right? And she trusted us enough to walk her through it. And then I saw her basically her lifestyle change where she was like I can remember the thing that she told me after she got her first notes and that stuff. She said, I now get a chance to enjoy this stuff I'm paying so much money for and I'm not just drinking through it. Because you want value added for your buy. I'm spending $100 on something. I want to enjoy it. And sometimes you got to go through and do that, right? And so when you do
But
this,
let's
oh, it's amazing.
but you know, like, but you know, one of the things that Bobby and I always talk about, um, is there are value the same way that there are value in cigars that are in the $6 to $8 range, right?
Oh yeah.
There's value in a 20 to of whiskey,
Oh,
right?
easily.
You know, and it's like sometimes if you don't kind of go, what was it I heard the other night? What did Jack say to us? You if you don't if you don't kiss the bottom shelf, you'll never appreciate the top shelf. Is
Yeah.
that right?
Yep. Yep. You got to kiss the bottom shelf to appreciate the top.
So
Well, in it.
one thing
So
I've noticed on
Go
this
ahead.
cigar is that since I started with the drinking and smoking, the retro is coming across different from when I lit it before we started.
Oh yeah.
Now, and that's normal within the pairing on that are
Yeah.
so
by
so I
recirculating
would
that air through my mouth that's already saturated with that whiskey.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, I would have to, from a pairing standpoint, I would ask, did it complement or did it mute something? And that could be muting something in the whiskey or muting something in the cigar.
Well, the the black pepper I was hitting off of the retro before we started was there, but it's coming across a bit bolder to me now, where it has more of a sharpness to that black pepper.
Well, and that may be that barrel spice that you were saying that the cinnamon is giving it that little bit of heat that's giving it a little bit more intensity. Because, and that's the
Yep.
thing, right? Because sometimes you'll get like the whiskey will amplify, because what you're usually trying to find is something that makes the cigar taste a little bit better and the whiskey taste a little bit better because you want them to complement each other. Now, there's plenty of times that they don't. Something like Zach said, sometimes something will mute something. The other thing is that a lot of times you will amplify something like because you have that little bit of proof on there. Now that is getting more register from that cinnamon, that pepper's getting a little bit hotter, a little peppier. Now that
I
might
guess
change when you go into the body. The body of the cigar might come back down a little bit. But just what I would do is like when
but
I feel like that and I feel like it's a little peppery, taste my whiskey and see if my whiskey tastes a little hotter or if it's muting it out. And then I just kind of, but it's really small sips, Dane. I can't even tell you. And I'll be the first to say that I probably am very unique in this. I sip incredibly small. I'd say my sips are probably equal to 4 drops. Now, granted, I'm not saying to do that.
it's like
I just do that.
it's McDonald's hot coffee that's gonna a lawsuit if it spills in your lap. Like, that's the size of the sip. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like,
you don't want a lot.
It's almost like you've seen the coffee tasters, where they sip the spoon. It's almost it's about half of that really. But sister we're all pairing. I personally I've got a Mad Claw from the Herfners.
I've got the Clowns 5150.
And I have the Blessed Leaf of Judah from Ezra Zion, and I am with the Pine Bluffs Distillery Straight Bourbon Whiskey, which has been in my house for a year.
And I'm doing Green River Weeded Bourbon.
Somebody gifted it to me, and I said thank you, and it's been sitting there because I didn't know what to do with it, and I didn't want to, But
see, Joe knows me. Joe knows me too well. I'm looking at Joe's comment, and Joe knows me. He's like, "We need going to 132 proof." I've got it right in front of me.
I've actually bounced around because I brought several things out, and I think I'm going to end up back where I kind of
He always ends up in
and
Scotch.
enjoyed it. Yeah, I'm sorry, man.
Hey,
Probably gonna
Danny,
end up
I'll tell
back
you
here.
this, something that might be really nice.
Aaron 10.
One of the things that we do when we take our sips, and I don't know that we talk about it as much as we probably should. I know that we do it just by trade because we're so used to doing it, is that sometimes I'll take that sip and I push that sip to the back sides of my palate fast because I get so much interesting barrel spice that does better with cigar. And I take that little bit of sweet in the front, but then I put it back on that side palate just because I get so much nuance in that bitter spices and stuff like that kind of trigger sometimes it makes my cigar, kind of sweeten up a little bit. Almost feel like it went from to a really robust medium bodied cigar, and I find that when I push it to my back sides of my palate. I do that very often.
And one of the things Danny said, hey, it brought up that black pepper note. For people that like really peppery cigars, to know that a whiskey is going to bring up that pepper note and kind of sharpen it up a bit, for lack of kind of a better term, like that's a positive aspect for a lot of people. Other people who are kind of sensitive to that pepper, the other way, they're going to say, I don't know. Listen, and that's okay. right? It's okay to say, listen, that doesn't hit my palate in the right spot. But I think for Danny just said, hey, listen, that's good for me, right? That's something you enjoy. You found a bourbon that heightened something, a kind of muted flavor in that cigar, slightly muted. All of a sudden, now you introduce this whiskey, and you're like, oh yeah, there you go. There's a much stronger pepper presence, and that's a positive experience.
It is, now the flavors off of the smoke itself, like you were talking about that muted, do come across a bit more muted. The only flavor that's really kind of standing out to me off of the smoke, not in the retro, but on the palate, is more of like a raw leather. Is about the only thing that's really kind of standing out. Everything else, the flavors are kind of muted because I'm really picking up those flavors off of the whiskey.
Yeah, so your whiskey isn't getting stripped. Maybe a little bit of your stick is, and then normally what Zach and I would do is we'd say if you had other whiskey, it's like, well, hey, what else do you have? And we'd try to put you on something else. But you can. And Zach and I, you've watched for a while. Zach and I will go like, hey, we really thought this was the one. Wrong, it wasn't. We had to adjust because I don't want something to wipe it out. Now, the interesting fact, the reason why that I told you earlier, we know the minimum age of your whiskey is because of what it says on the bottle.
Okay.
Yours says straight bourbon. Right?
Sure.
Yeah. So straight bourbon whiskey, in order to have straight bourbon, it doesn't matter where it's from, bourbon's anywhere in America, but to be considered straight bourbon, it must be aged a minimum of 2 years.
Okay.
A minimum. Now, if it's under 4, they must tell you the age of the youngest liquid in there. If it's over 4 years, they don't have to tell you any age. So if there's no age statement on it, it should be over 4 years.
It doesn't say anything. I don't see any stampage on here.
Then it's 4+
on a bottle
then
date
over,
or anything.
Then it's over 4 years.
Okay, and plus the year it's been in my house.
Well, technically, once it goes into the bottle, it doesn't age anymore.
It doesn't age.
Oh,
anymore.
okay. So there's no additional aging that goes in. So all the aging takes place within the barrel.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. Prior to them bottling it, that's basically that stops the aging process.
Yeah, typically the age statement is when it's put into the barrel, and then when it's dumped. That is your aging. It's in the barrel.
So essentially, it's when that oxygen hits, starts the oxidation process on it. It kills the aging off of on the alcohol.
Well, yeah, because you're sealing it at that point. You're taking the distiller is putting it at what they want it to be to achieve the flavor profile that they're looking for at the proof that they're looking for. So when you have an 80, right, it went into the barrel at X, but they knew that no matter what, it was going to be cut to a proof that they wanted it to come out at 80. So there's a couple different ways that distilleries do that. How they'll say like barrel entry, barrel proof. They'll cut it when it comes out to a proof, or they'll cut it before it goes in. It just depends on what they're hoping. That's why you see a lot of different terms with something will be barrel proof or full proof or, straight from the barrel. All those have technically different theoretical terms of what they were hoping to do. So they may put something in at a certain proof, and what it comes out at is going to be different, right? Typically, it's going to be higher proof.
Okay.
And
water's going to
evaporate. Be noted that the general consensus in America is that whatever we go in at is lower going to dump at. I would say 95% of our barrels. We're going to go in at, and what is it? Is it 125, Bobby? That is max entry proof. Max entry proof on a bourbon is 125 proof, and then it will rhyme, and then they'll proof it down to whatever their
It must,
bottling
in order
strength
to
is
be,
going to
in
be.
order to be bourbon, it must be a minimum of 80. So they can't bottle it any less than 80. Anything less than
Agreed.
80, it becomes a liqueur, or not whiskey, right? And that's whiskey across the board. It doesn't matter if it's Scotch, Canadian, whatever. It must
Mm-hmm.
be at least 80 proof. Anything below that would
Yep.
be more of like a liqueur, or something like that, right? It's not
Yep.
considered whiskey at that point.
Okay. That's good information to know. All right. Why I love learning. This is like really fun.
Because like my whiskey has made my cigar. I'm like, I'm into the body. I'm starting to get like crazy sweeter notes, but I'm also doing a 90 proof wheated bourbon, which for me, I know a wheater is going to be a little bit lighter. It's going to be easier to drink. It is going to put out more of a sweet profile that's going to be more into those, which you'd say like savory sweets, your caramels, your sweets that would go into like butterscotches and stuff like that, because there's the absence of rye, which takes away all the spice. So it's much more of a sweeter, easier drinker. That's why you find a lot of people paying top dollar for easy weeded drinkers. Every Pappy we've ever heard of is all weeded. All of your Wellers are all weeded. So when you start talking about those ones, when I think of people that are like chasing those, I think of those people as drinkers, not sippers, because it's easy to drink, right? That's why they're getting it. It's easy to drink.
I
Excellent.
mean, they're
I'm
gonna put
up
it
over
on. They're
here
gonna
on their
probably.
website, looking at their at what they have.
Because this Green River and this 5150 are complementing each other amazingly good. This just happened to be fortunate that it happened right away. That doesn't always happen. Now I know that I could go to my 131.1 proof here and it would do good, but it would be a completely different profile. It's going to change because it is, this is still a straight bourbon. It's unfiltered, but it's at barrel proof. So I'm going to get a lot more nuances of the barrel. I'm going to get a lot more of those spices because it's at high proof. It didn't get cut with water.
See, that's like for me. You know, generally that mag claw is that kind of uh, uh, super heavy, drying to the palate, kind of a string. It's just going to take away all the moisture in my palate, which is funny because as I'm sitting here with this particular scotch, and the sweetness is gone. Like I'm accentuating like the barley, like the true barley flavor. Like it's like all the barrel sweetness out of it. While the sweetness in the whiskey went down, it brought out all the sweetness in this tobacco. So it's a much different Mad Claw than I've smoked in the past. If I were just going to smoke this, while drinking some water or something, you know, there's definitely the tobacco is much sweeter now comparatively, and the barley barley is funny because barley is different. Barley sweet is different than corn sweet, and anybody that's never had it, it's kind of a difficult thing to um but barley generally is a more savory sweet, um where corn is kind of your, there's a lot of Scotch drinkers that are like, I don't like bourbon because it's corn sweet, right? Made at craft distilleries. Um,
Mine
Pretty
is
much all the
not.
bourbons. No. Bobby's is one of the what, like eight
It's the
oldest.
10th. It's the 10th oldest
It's
distillery in
tenth
Kentucky.
oldest, tenth oldest.
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
Bobby's is I started on a craft, which is Old Elk. Um,
Yeah.
that's a But that is a straight wheat whiskey, 6 years old. It's all uh,
Um,
straight wheat whiskey.
this
So
would be considered a craft distillery where they're from. This it's not one of the big
No,
guys.
so technically, no, it would not. It
Okay,
wouldn't be considered craft because they are grain to glass.
okay,
Because they're not doing something where they're using something else, or they're not distilling here, they're not doing here. They are their own distillery producing their own distillate. I wouldn't consider that a craft because there's not using someone else's, coming in with something else and doing that stuff, right? I think it's more of the idea that now a lot of times people say craft because they're new, but new people usually when they're doing the craft is they're implementing someone else's juice or something like that. According to what you told me about that distillery and what the bottle said, that's grain to glass. So I don't know that I would consider that necessarily craft because they're not taking and using any other people's
okay.
stuff to get to. Now that's I'd have to look to see what actually identifies a craft. Usually it's like people a lot of times will say craft is everybody but the big guys. But usually to be able to produce something, you're throwing out stuff that's like MGP sourced, or they're sourcing their whiskey to get to a nuance and doing different stuff. To me, they're just using their grain to their distillate to drop it as a straight bourbon. So I don't know that I would consider them craft necessarily. What do you think, Zach?
I would consider them craft because in unless you're like a true major operation, unless almost you have the ability to make enough juice for yourself plus somebody else, I would say that's one of the big guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Craft. I would agree with that. I would say craft or
So
independent.
because it's an
With.
independent and not owned as a big conglomerate, right?
I
Okay.
would I would I would classify that as craft.
Because, you read the back of the bottle, it says, "From farm to bottle, the liquid gold in your hand has been custom crafted from the ground up using High Plains grains sourced no more than 30 miles from the distillery itself. We've
That's
mastered a
awesome.
unique taste that's as true to Wyoming as the hands that made it."
Yeah. So I mean, if you're
That
looking
sounds
at like
fantastic. I mean
yeah,
that.
and the fact that it says it's non-chill filtered is also fantastic because you're getting the true profile of the flavor, and it's not being chilled down to a different profile. So yeah,
Well, okay,
if
Bobby.
you're looking
Bobby,
at craft as an independent, then
explain
yes,
explain what you mean when you say it's non-chill filter.
yeah. So non-chill filtering
What
means that
what is chill? What is chill filter?
yeah. So chill filtering is a process in which they take this through really a chilling process to get to a certain flavor profile. In the same way that you might take, let's take for example, you take a whiskey and you put it in your refrigerator and you take it out and pour it in a glass, right? It's going to taste completely different, usually more muted, a little bit tamer. It may amp up a little bit of the soft stuff,
Well,
but not much. But when you talk about actually going through and chill filtering, they're doing just that. I mean, it kind of says its name for itself, right? They're chill filtering it.
well, but the purpose of chill filtering is to strip some of the fatty acids off of the solution itself, right? They chill
Yeah,
it to make it easier. They go through a kind of a really fine filter, and it traps those fattier
yeah,
compounds. Case they haven't, which says a lot for them proofing it all the way down to 80 proof. Because if that bottle gets cold, you may see the solution start to actually separate. That is not your whiskey has not gone bad. Okay, guys, it just the fats have now separated from the solution. Give it a couple of turns up and down, it'll reintroduce itself, and it's fine to drink.
yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so I kind of did a small retro from my last sip through there, and it was like a tangy fruitiness off the retro. Now mixed with the retro off of the cigar, it's very nice. That it muted that pepper down and added that kind of that sweetness from that tangy fruitiness I was getting off that retro. So it melded very well. The only thing I can say is maybe trying a different bourbon to try and accentuate the flavors off of the smoke, so that it's just not kind of muted down.
So I will say this for sure. You're getting ready to enter into a very slippery slope. And I say this laughingly because as much as you start getting intrigued with going down different bourbons and that stuff, then you start finding your way into Irishes and Scotches and all these different flavor profiles. And you're just like, yes. You're like, yes.
I already got the obsession bug is already starting to kick in. I gotta control myself off of this.
I can tell you my favorite thing about doing whiskey and cigars together is that it prolongs your experience in the fact that your cigar lasts longer and you don't have to drink so much. Therefore, you find yourself with a cigar being able to have a good time longer without the adverse effects of just drinking or just smoking. You don't go through your cigar as fast. You're not going through as much whiskey. Therefore, you can be 4 or 5 hours and be perfectly fine and have a great time. And that's what I enjoy personally. Now, that doesn't mean that me and Zach don't get the moment where we're like, hey, we're going to just drink. When Zach's had too much, because he just does a snagglepuss and he exits stage right and poof.
I'm gone. I ghost. Straight up. I'm Casper, man. I'm the friendly ghost. I'm just gone.
It's like,
at the same time, I'm not
in the back of the palate off of the cigar. I'm not getting much up front, but in the back, I'm starting to pick up more flavors.
But but that makes sense, right? Because what did I say earlier, right? That saliva in the background is going to start capturing a lot of stuff. And that happens a lot with that flavor because you have that barrel spice, you have all that other stuff back there. And they start marrying back here. You start getting these notes back in your palate. And it isn't so much, you get that sweetness that first hits on your tongue, but then it goes back to everything savory in the back. So the back of the finish is where whiskey and cigar collide. And they make a beautiful bouquet.
It is very savory in the back of the palate. I can say that there is really, there's this very kind of earthy umami type feel I'm getting in the back of the palate. This char is I'm picking up more of this char in the back of the palate, more of this earthiness in the back of the palate.
Are you getting any hints
raw
of
leather still sticking in the middle of the palate?
Are you getting any chocolate or heavy cocoa or
any chocolate?
Not getting any of that?
No.
Yeah. All right.
And there may be in this, and I just don't have that.
Oh no. I'm just asking.
For this,
what you're getting, you're getting is right. Leather is a absolute note that would be in the textiles, right? It's not uncommon to get leather notes back there, especially with a cigar.
Right dead center middle, I'm picking up that leather's where it's sitting, and it's a raw leather type taste sitting right there. But that back of the palate is like beautiful. Like I want to dance in the back of my throat right now.
Yeah, that's right. But it doesn't matter what you're drinking, right? If you do the palate acclimation first, it doesn't really matter what it is. You will let the things subside as you acclimate to it, and you'll get the best that spirit was intended, as long as you take the time to acclimate first.
Absolutely.
I
absolutely,
really
and that that acclimation process, as you move up in proofs, kind of becomes more important.
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
What is that?
The higher the proof, the higher the ethanol, the more
Absolutely.
it will trigger your
Absolutely.
olfactory. So you want to blow out your mouth and be sure that you're being really conscious of exhausting in the beginning out of your mouth so you don't trigger that olfactory so much. Because, if you've ever taken one, you'll get like sinuses will swell, your tear ducts will start to water a little bit. It's much better to get that out and then have the essence of it than it is to have the ethanol.
This is like insane right now. I'm like,
I'm watching your
I'm
face
like,
and
my
it's
mind's
making me
blown
so
on
happy.
this. Like my mind's blown by this. Like literally, like I can't stop drooling.
Well, I mean, listen.
I'm loving the flavors.
I have a feeling that like this process is going. This to me this process is going to be easier for you, Danny, because you already had this really refined cigar palate. Now it's just a matter of taking all of those things that you kind of already knew and applying them to something a little. Now, the vocabulary, the way you speak about it does change slightly, but the fact that you are confident in what you are tasting and smelling it already puts you, like 3 steps ahead of, somebody coming into this brand spanking new, start drinking whiskey and I want to start smoking cigars.
And
That's going to be a much different.
She's right on point with that. Finding different beverages like, hey, coffee and cigars are banger. We know that. Rum, usually if you're rum, because you're talking about a sugar whiskey, that's going to be sweet. So you want to think, okay, well, if I have a sweet drink, what do I have in the cigar world to kind of amp up my cigar, but bring it down some, right? And I mean, rum is fantastic with cigars. Tequilas are great, but all of them start with an acclimation first. I don't start with the cigar first. I start with my whiskey to figure out what cigar I want because I'm about putting out my cigar. But I can pour a little bit of whiskey and change it if I need to.
Now, I wonder, running this process, like this acclimation process on this, for somebody like me, I despise the taste of coffee. If maybe this would bring me kind of into that fold of maybe experimenting a little bit with a little bit of coffee, not a lot, because again,
well, I mean, you do the same thing, right? Yeah, because you're going to get some of those bad notes, but the problem is if someone gets it and they're like, "Ooh, I don't like that." Well, do you even know if you like it? I mean, you have to. Now, you may do an acclimation of that stuff and get done with it and be like, "Yeah, I freaking hate this." That's fine too, but at least you know. At least you know. Or you could say, well, I think this would be better if I put like a little bit of cream in it, or I did this with it. And if I put a little bit of cream with my coffee, how would that play with my cigar? Or what I'm saying? There's like, you just, every time I taste something, I simply go through the idea of what do I have that would make this better? Now granted, I've had this thrown at me a million times. They're like, man, I just want to drink and smoke. I don't want to think about all that stuff. I agree with you. However, when you've done it enough, you acclimate really fast and you don't really have to think of it. Me and Zach can be on it, talking, drinking, and we can be acclimated so fast. We do it by nature. We're just so usually part of our natural process that it comes faster as you get better.
It's an ingrained.
Yeah. It's like a muscle memory.
It almost becomes it's a reflex, right? Right, for us it's a reflex. Like we can sit there and go, okay, we can even smell the glass sometimes and just go, we'll think it's right, smell the glass, and you go, that's not really gonna work. I'm gonna have to muscle through this little pour and switch to something else. And usually we're right. Now there have been where certain whiskeys were not great at kind of the first third of the cigar. They weren't even great kind of in the middle of the cigar. But all of a sudden we hit the final third.
Oh, yeah.
And there's something about that whiskey that amps up and pairs better with that final third because there's something there that, marries up with whatever whiskey we didn't think worked. So it is a process, and it's a matter of paying attention. If you're already paying attention to your cigar, then paying attention to the whiskey is kind of second nature already. You could go about it in a little bit of a different way.
But I love what
Well,
you're
I've
doing,
watched-
though. You're noticing all the differences because I'm watching you. I can hear Zach, but I'm watching you because, as an instructor, that's what I do. I watch everybody to see what they're doing, right? And it's good. Like, I love the fact that you're taking that smell and you're smelling like that, and then you're like piecing things. It's like a puzzle, right? You're putting these pieces together.
And for a cigar I've never smoked before, I can't compare flavors and everything since this is the first time smoking this one. So I kind of went into this blind where maybe I probably should have picked a cigar that I'm very familiar with to see how the change was. But I'm all right with the flavors being muted on that because what flavors I'm picking up, I'm enjoying off of it. The cigar itself now is getting really creamy, and I feel that I don't know how creamy this stick was before, but I think maybe I'm getting more of that just because I'm producing more of that saliva.
Right. Well, I know that for me, I've had the
That's
5150, and you guys have had the 5150, but this Green River weeded bourbon gave me a note that I've never had on this before, and I've got a retro of Cracker Jacks. I've got a Cracker Jack retro that's signature. I knew what it was as soon as I smelled it. It was like that really nice caramel, like a Crunch and Munch, somewhere in a Crunch and Munch or a Cracker Jack. And I'm like,
caramel corn.
I was part of the
corn.
blending sessions with the 5150 before it was released, and we hated that stick because that retro and the aromatics coming off that stick was so florally that it was overbearing to the cigar. And so it's like, I don't even think letting that sit for a while is going to take that out. But whatever they did, whether they went back and did a little tweak or they let it sit longer, that floraliness kind of really went away in that stick.
Yeah.
Because it was potent. Oh, and just speak of the devil, look at who shows up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like the 5150 a lot. I mean, the way that changed in 6 months from when we tested that blend out to when it got released, I would have thought it was a completely different cigar.
But I've had the exact same thing with doing barrel picks for whiskey. We'll go through and we'll get a barrel and we're like, okay, this is it. This is what we want. This is really good. And then it still ages a little bit before it ever makes it to bottle. And when it comes out, you're like, wow, why did this get so much better? This is so good. Yeah, his
Boone has made his appearance. Wow, all the big hitters are coming in now. Welcome, guys. I am in a bourbon education class tonight. I am learning basically as a beginner on how to set my palate and really work through drinking bourbon for the first time and really understand the nuances of how to really enjoy. And I gotta say, I'm thoroughly enjoying this a lot.
That's awesome.
I mean, that's the whole purpose, right? Right. If we have you, we allow you to have a better experience than what Bobby and I have done, and kind of what we preach. Just you're helping us prove the point. You know what I mean? That number one, it works. When people take the time, slow down a little bit, and try to have a more thoughtful experience. And sometimes it, like Bobby said, we don't get it right. And that's one of the things about our lives is we have no problem saying that we made the wrong kind of guess in our hypothesis whenever we first initially started. Sometimes sometimes, you know, the whiskey just needs to change. You just need to go with something else. You know, I brought some stuff out tonight, and I ended up back on the that was a picture I didn't need. You know, I just see him sitting on the stoop, and I hate for somebody walks by. You know, that's all I gotta say.
The guidon is raised.
It is. Now I gotta say, so that carameliness that has been sitting right here for most of the night now has taken on I more of like a melted caramel instead of kind of like that fresh caramelness. More of like I put it in a pot and melted it type taste.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't stop drooling, man. I never thought that this would be something that would engage these receptors in my palate the way it has.
Well, it's also
you know,
something that he said that your palate has now really become much more accustomed than when we first started an hour ago.
Well, not only that, but he's becoming more aware. He's starting to. I mean, this is really, Danny, like really because of what Zach said earlier. Because you have such a acknowledged tasting for cigars, this transition should become very normal for you because you're aware, right? And you have to be, spatially aware of what's going on. So the fact that you're getting that, it will only keep getting better because it's softening. Everything is softening. You're becoming more aware. The whiskey isn't hot anymore. There's not like, I don't have any heat down here. And people's like, oh, it burns. It won't. It'll go away. And I've had people say, no, it don't. I say, oh, then you're drinking wrong. It does. You just have to take your time. And it's not saying that they're drinking wrong. I don't mean it that way. I mean that you have to take the time to accustom your palate. And then you start finding the nuances that let people find the flavor wheel. You find like this caramel. Okay, well, that's in there. And then you can start expanding on your sweets or expanding on your textiles. Like you're finding leather and you're finding barrel oak and you're finding this. Those are the things you should be finding.
To me, the how the way that these flavors are coming across, where I've smoked cigars, I've gotten that barrel oak taste out of cigars. I've gotten that caramel out of cigars. But the way that these flavors are hitting it's coming across bolder and richer in my palate than they do when it's just smoking a cigar by itself. It's almost as if these are more of the flavors, maybe how I should have been tasting this in the 20 plus years I've been smoking. Maybe I should have. Are these the way the flavors are supposed to come across, or is it just that the liquor is kind of it's expanding out that palate that I already have?
Well, I think it could be both, right? I think it could be that you're paying so much attention to what you're doing. It could be one thing, or the whiskey is helping to capture it, and you're tasting a heightened version because the whiskey is part of it. So I think both. I think the answer to me would be both, because when it does make you slow down and you do take the time, you do start finding this stuff. And Ash is right. You do get some amplification, right? This like, wow, this note that I like, now it's more bold because I'm getting the whiskey that's catching it, the nuances in there. And you've acclimated. I think the biggest thing, if I can say anything, is acclimation helps you get the better experience to a cigar or a whiskey. It's taking the time to get there, then you start noticing everything.
I'm not even, I haven't, the moment I pick that up and get ready to take a sip from my glass there, my mouth's already drooling because it's anticipating what's coming. I mean, it's like, yes, we want more of this.
That's awesome. I mean, that's like that. Yeah. It's for us that's successful, right? That's kind of what we hope for in the beginning. That's allowing someone find the enjoyment that Bobby and I have with these two things together, and to
Oh,
pass
yeah.
that on to someone else. That's
the best. That's why we do it.
That's the best.
Wow.
That's exactly why we do it.
I go back to watching a lot of your shows, and a lot of what you've talked about in your shows. It's starting to make sense in my head now from
Yeah.
watching you guys. You know what you're talking about when you talk about this or when you say this. It's starting to make sense, and you know it's clicking.
Awesome.
The dots are being connected, and that's what we're here for. You know,
Right.
however we can help.
This is so amazing. Like my mind's blown by this whole experience right now. Yeah,
I mean, that's
awesome.
ours. Oh, now I don't know. I don't know if he's quite ready for that. But
I
then
don't know
again,
if
you know, some
I don't
people
know
are
if
really
I'm ready for anything, Pete.
so
Pete it is.
there
No, but
you
Sister of
know
the Week,
there are
sometimes
people.
Sister of the Week said, would it be helpful to do the same cigar pairing that everyone's supposed to? Yes, it is. But until we have, you have to have that pretty pre-planned and say, hey, listen, try this and try this. But in this case, we just wanted to do a palate acclimation to help Danny find, and Danny had one whiskey. So it is fun to do it as a group because you do find nuances, and it's cool because I may say something, Zach may say something, and down the road, Danny may say something, which is good because a lot of times you have a profile that you're finding and you're thinking certain thoughts. And then Zach may say something, and I was like, oh, you know what? I didn't think about that. And then you're like, oh, yeah, this is really good. So, it's good to have that thought back and forth to each other. But for tonight, it couldn't have gone any better. I knew that Danny would be able to acclimate. It's just giving someone the tools, pulling the tools out of the tool bag and say, hey, do this first.
This is fun. This has just been so phenomenal. Unbelievable.
Yeah, and Joe's trying to throw you under the bus and put you right into like Pete did. We're like, hey, slow down, Joe. Slow down.
But truth be told, there are some people that are really receptive to it, right? And it's not off-putting to them. So it's not unheard of.
Here you go. Closer.
Uh-oh. It should be on my.
Now I hear you.
Listen, I'm gonna pop off and pop back in because I think it is my connection, and sometimes if I pop out and pop right back in, then it'll fix it. So y'all give me 1 second.
You got it.
No, I'm happy that you're finding this, right?
I am. I'm totally. I wish I was tasting more of the cigar, but I'm all right with that. Where it's at because what I'm tasting in the back of the palate is phenomenal as it's mixed. Like that just mesh together. It's a beautiful mix. I mean, it tastes phenomenal to me.
Yeah, and over time you'll find that balance where one makes them both better. It just is just that time, taking that time. Because quite honestly, I think that had you not already picked out a cigar and done the whiskey, you could have said, hey, I think this cigar, because the cigar you said you thought would have been good isn't what you went with.
No.
You went with something different. Whereas if you would have went the other one, I think you would have found that.
Yes, and I think one of the ones I brought out with me would have gone really good with this whiskey on it.
Right.
But the retro, the where the retro by itself was really heavy, really black peppery, but that tarty, tangy fruitiness from retroing the whiskey really mellows out and mixes very well with that black pepper. So
right.
it's just, it's like, I like it a lot.
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah. Now, were you hearing Zach cut out, or was it just me hearing that?
I think it was just you. You
Oh,
sounded
was it
fine
just
to
me?
me, but
Might have been just what I was. Have I been cutting out at all?
no, no,
Okay.
both of you guys have sounded great. I haven't seen
Oh,
any
then,
issues,
yeah. Yeah.
but get
He should be
Zach
jumping
or
back in here. Yeah. There he is.
Okay, check, mic check,
Yeah.
mic check.
I hear
One,
you.
two.
I gotta readjust your audio again here. Give me a second.
Oh,
All right,
Now, Zach,
now
that could have been just me hearing it
check.
because Ash heard you and he heard you. I was the one who not hearing you good, but no one. So I don't know. It might have just been me.
No, it was it was everybody was breaking up on my end. So
Mm.
I figured out that everybody in my house is streaming right now. So you know how that goes.
I do. It's always Bobby.
it's always Bobby.
Exactly, Joe. Exactly, Joe.
So, well, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. It gave me an opportunity to grab a smoke because I had finished. So, I grabbed a little breakfast taco. You
Oh,
had
nice.
those yet, Danny?
Yes, I like the breakfast tacos. I was not a big fan of the carnitas from last year, but the breakfast taco is phenomenal, and the barbacoa. That was my 2021 cigar of the year. Was the barbacoa.
Okay, I'll be right back.
I liked this version of the carnitas better than the standard offering version of the carnitas.
This is so phenomenal. Like
It's a different way to explain you were already doing.
it is,
So
and I saw when you were off, and I was telling Bobby, I I can deal with the fact that the flavors off the cigar are kind of muted on it, but when they're mixing together in that deep part of my palate, it's very good. And doing a small retro with that, with the whiskey, adding that kind of tart, tangy fruitiness, has knocked off that really heavy black pepper through the retro, and so those two blend together very well.
it's interesting when you think about putting these two things together, because when you start to go down the rabbit hole, then you start, looking at, barrel types, and I mean they're, all different kinds of, right. And so then you start looking at like barrel makeup and how that affects, what you're having with it, and it becomes this like infinite number of combinations to play with. So you can take a cigar you've had 100 different whiskey, and it's like, whoa, this is a completely different experience.
I you know I feel like I've missed out on an awful lot over the last 20 plus years by not understanding the drink I've had, and I think that I probably would have had a lot more enjoyable experience had I known how properly, instead of just drinking something somebody gives to me and going, yeah, sure, it tastes fine. Not not actually knowing what it was I should be looking for or tasting.
Yeah.
Now, so just so you don't feel bad, Danny, the guy that got me first involved in whiskey and cigars was my brother. Um, and it's super funny. He um, drank whiskey and smoked cigars, but never did them together. And then fast forward years later, um, he got together with me at a cigar event. And he was drinking and drinking. And he hadn't had a cigar. He had taken a break from cigars for years. And I said, this cigar is going to be a hell of a lot better, and it's going to help sober you up a little bit if you have a cigar with it. And then he did, and he was just like, so I've been screwing myself for all these years. And I said, yeah, pretty much. So,
question here from.
So this is for Zach. Let Zach take this question.
Well, so Bobby is a purist. Bobby does not prefer, let's say prefer to add water to his whiskey. I am of the opinion that, especially if it's a new whiskey, I like to add a couple of drops. There's nothing wrong with it to me. What it allows me to identify in that whiskey is if I add that water, if there's water compounds, then actually the flavor of the whiskey is going to kind of get muted, right? It's going to lose something. On the converse side, if there are oily compounds in the solution, it's going to release those oily compound solution, and you're going to be able to taste those oils better, those fatty pits a little bit better, those fatty acids and stuff. So I like to put. Now, if you get something and you're just like, whoa, this is really hot, ethanol wise, put you some water in there. Don't think that you can't. If you like it cold, drop an ice cube in it. If you're, I would say if you're going to put it on ice, invest in some ice molds and gives you the large balled ice. Melt a whole lot slower than just a cubed piece of ice. So I have no problem putting water in it. It's a personal preference. Sometimes it gets better because you put some water in it, and like I said before, those oilier compounds in solution, and you'll be able to taste those individually rather than just as the homogenized solution itself. Now, the thing is you put a couple drops in it, and things just kind of get muted. You go, okay, this is a whiskey that I don't need to put any water in, because really, compounds that were in there, they were water soluble, so the water diluted them. So it's a trial and error and kind of a preference thing. So I don't have any problem with it. If you think that it needs it, you go right ahead and do it. Oh, I feel like I'm number one now, and you're number two.
I was sitting here thinking to myself.
You're the in between the two big boys.
That's right.
It's a weird spot to be in, guys.
He's the provolone.
Spot. It's a weird spot, man.
No, I started hearing some little noises, and I happened to notice that my Wi-Fi was still on.
Bobby doesn't like adding water so much he left. No.
Now that doesn't mean. I'll tell you what. The only time that I really find myself more susceptible to adding water, for me personally, is in Scotch. I feel like if I do it with Scotch, I'm able to pick up some notes that I think otherwise could be muted. I don't find it so much in bourbon. I think that's probably because I've done bourbons for so long that I know what I like in it, and I have a really good breakdown of my own thought and my own palate when I'm tasting something that I can get. Now, when I started going into Scotch, I drank Scotch before, but I don't really consider myself a Scotch drinker until about 3 years ago, where I really dove into it and started figuring it out and finding it and finding the enjoyment of it and all the things I like about it. But then I would add water. Now, I didn't want to, but Zach made me, and I did find benefit to it.
But, on the bourbon side, Bobby likes stuff high proof and is not going to be afraid. He's never going to find it hot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. But if you do, there's nothing wrong with putting a couple of drops of water in there to help mute it. You think, if it's something, especially if it's something cask strength. Now, the difference I think there is when you're talking about, stuff in the bottled and bond, which is 100 proof, and the bottled and bond and lower, which is 100 proof and lower. If there is a high rye mash bill, there's going to be a spice in there that is not related to the alcohol. It's related to the mash bill, and it's that. And we mentioned this earlier, but it's something that will normally hit you kind of in the front of your tongue. It's similarly like noticing the differences in pepper types on a cigar. When you start to talk about the difference in white pepper loves to hit you back here, red pepper likes on the front of your tongue. Rye spice is going to be right there on the front of your tongue. So that's not really something you want to mute. That's something you want to acclimate to.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, if something is a little overproof and it's still a little bit much, a couple drops of water is not going to hurt it. If you've got your water bottle, don't pour from the water bottle because you're more likely going to get too much water. Pour into the lid. Pour into the lid and then lid into your glass. And that way you have much more controlled experience putting water into your whiskey. So,
and realistically, I think one of the reasons why it's really hard for me to add water is, quite honestly, I go by an adage that, I've kind of adopted for myself. The smaller the pour, the smaller you drink. Therefore, I pour really small. Into my Glen, I don't pour very much. So to get that kind of water in there, it's like we're talking drops because I'm not pouring very much. I noticed that if someone pours more whiskey into their glass, the more there is, the bigger the drink is. And I don't know the psyche behind it, but it just tends to be true. So I pour just a little bit, and I find that I sip it much smaller. And I just am very every time I'm with my brother will not pour his glass. He makes me do it. Because he pours like a pour. Like what in whiskey we call it a Perry pour. Because there's a guy named Perry that pours like 3/4 of a glass of whiskey and drinks it. And I'm like, yeah, no. The smaller the pour, the better. And I also feel like it opens up better when there's less in there. So he pulls his blend to the top.
Then you just defeated the whole purpose of that glass. Mm-hmm. If you're pouring a Glencairn all the way to the top, you defeated every the entire purpose of that glass. And
I
will
pour
say
more than a finger.
Joe, you're so funny. I will say, as you kind of find yourself, Danny, as you get more into this, glassware will become a thing that kind of matters.
Yeah.
And these, if you like a stem, they're these, they have that nice tulip shape. These are a little bigger. Glencairns are slightly smaller, but the tulip is a little tighter. Yeah, you guys can see like the difference.
Yeah, these are the difference.
This has got a little more bulb. So, the idea is
if you don't have
keep
a Glen,
below,
Danny, we'll get you one.
Below the bulb, and what it allows it really to do is it keeps the ethanol. The ethanol vapors are heavy vapors. All of the aromas are going to be lighter vapors, right? They're going to come up the top of the glass. So you go smell the top of the glass, you're like, all these like real sweet notes. And I did. I actually when I changed cigars, I changed whiskey, and I went to a peated Kilholman. This is actually like a blend of 3 different barrels, which is a bourbon barrel, Madeira. Fantastic stuff. So
I'm getting Stag.
I mean, I get all the sweet wine notes up on the top, but then if I smell the bottom, put my nose at the bottom of the glass, that's where I smell sweet peat. You know, all the denser flavors are lower in the glass. Um, so as you move along, I will say, you know, glassware will begin, you know, will begin to matter, because it really does improve the experience. Um, one of the things, like Bobby mentioned, that glass helps you pour small, and
Yeah.
kind of, you know, it's not to say that you can't have that experience in a rocks glass. It's tougher. Um, so as we probably will become more important, that, you know, you pick yourself up a Glencairn, and
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
it, it, and that honestly will change the whiskey experience probably as much as your cigar experience tonight has changed.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you're gonna be like, whoa, this was the same whiskey I remembered from last night, and I go, this is completely different, because now you're really getting the aromas, you
And you're
know.
also going to expect that to taste different down the road because you've opened it, and you're going to have a little bit more headspace in it, which is more open air. And you will
Possible.
find that as that sits a little bit, that's going to get better. It will get better. A little bit of headspace
I
helps.
feel like running over to the liquor store right now. I feel like I've
Sounds like
Obviously,
we're.
we've
It
done our
sounds like
job
we.
well.
I've been missing out.
It sounds like we need to get you some samples or give you some guidance, at least on where to go and what you're looking for, and
I mean,
because
if I,
it does help that you're not just going and wasting money. You know, you do want
oh yeah,
some
most
guidance at
definitely.
first. You know, so
DoorDash.
like if you're going and you say, hey, you know, put together, you know, a short list of things I should look for, and we could definitely do that of things I think that would be the normal ones that I say, hey, go get these first because the price is right and they're readily available. That are they're all gonna be different. They're gonna have a different profile, but they're gonna pair well. And there's like, because we get asked that quite often, you know, what are like three that you would say or four, you know, whether it be bourbon or scotch. And we will definitely give you some guidance on that. So you're not just going in there blind trying to figure out what to buy.
Okay.
I mean, if you're talking, you know, for bourbons, honestly, I'm going to think of two right off the bat. I mean, I'd want you to get Wild Turkey 101.
Yeah.
And I would want you to get Elijah Craig 94.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. Those would be the first two I would say as well.
Okay.
One of
I
them
mean,
has a signature cherry note, and one of them has a signature soft vanilla note. And they're both really, really good whiskeys. And you're talking about a proof point between 94 proof and 101 proof. And you'll see the difference of, you know, distillers, the proof difference, because there's a big difference between just 94 and 101, even though it's always, you know, you're talking about like what, 7 proof
well,
points. It's totally different.
but that turkey profile, you're going to have that higher rye profile. So
Yeah.
that ethanol at first is going to feel like it's higher until like your brain can pick apart the difference between that rye spice, and that's what'll come on the palate. The palate, you'll
Yeah.
notice the rye spice up front and that proof point in the back. So they'll go, okay, this has got more rye in it because I'm getting more of that, you know, that pepper, kind of that red pepper tingle right up on the front of my palate. And then on the finish, you'll go, okay, there's the proof, because, you know, it'll be back here at the, you know, the sides of your. So, and listen, neither one of those bottles are particularly expensive.
Oh no, not at all. 20
I mean,
some dollars
you're
each
looking at, yeah, I mean, you're looking to get out of the store for, you know, $50. That's
for
both
both.
bottles, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, and that's, you know, I think those are great. Those are bottles that we, and, you know, between the two of us, you know, I don't even want to think about the number of bottles. You know, I've got too many. Like, I'm not even buying bottles. I'm just like trying to drink through some, you know.
Yeah.
And Bobby's built up such a stash that he's kind of doing the same thing because, man, we're not out there chasing the next best thing until we hear about something that's really worthwhile for us to go out and get.
Right.
And that's when I hate when I hear people that are whiskey and they're like, oh man, I've got to go out and spend $80 on a bourbon. No, you don't. Well, but everybody else told me that this is $80. That's going to be better. It's going to be better than this $50 bourbon. In some cases, that
Not always.
$80 bourbon is in a different bottle than that $50 bourbon, and they're the same thing.
Yeah.
And they can be the exact same thing. It's just somebody paid a lot more out in marketing than someone else did, so they kept the bottle at monthly subscriptions. I would say leave your subscription services to cigars rather than.
Agreed. Yeah, I don't have, or nor would I ever join a bourbon monthly subscription. I just am not a fan because you're basing it off of someone else's thought. And, when you can go out and do that same thing to yourself for, a fraction of the cost. I mean, really
you're paying for the labor for them to basically give you a sample bottle when you probably could have gone out and 1 month bought one bottle, next month bought the next bottle, and you got a whole bottle. And
right,
because those you're paying for a lot of marketing and a lot of labor. Just I don't think anybody's come up with a formula that really works. I would subscription services for cigars I think have done a much better job.
Yeah. So what other questions do you have, Danny?
You've answered all my questions, man, and this has been a remarkable, enjoyable experience for me. I learned an awful lot tonight, and I appreciate your guys' time and showing me the ways of getting this started. It's a great experience.
So I have a question. So did you have an expectation when you started about where you thought the pairing was going to take you? And if so, was that different?
I got to say that my expectation was to hopefully learn something and not so much try and pick up flavors off the palate, but more so try and learn to where if I'm out somewhere, I have some sort of an idea. But I picked up so much more than what I anticipated to learn tonight that really the tools were already in my mouth. I already had that. It was just the ability to kind of put them in place in the order in which they needed to go.
Awesome.
Cool.
And I think that
awesome,
you guys did a wonderful job in, that walkthrough, that step by step, and getting me into that right. So now going out somewhere and somebody gives me a drink on something, I know what I need to do, and I can, instead of just saying, yeah, it's great, actually give an honest opinion.
And I'll say this. Going out somewhere can actually be a cheaper way to try something, because if you don't like it, even if you spent $15 on the drink, you didn't buy a full bottle for $75, $80. Right? It's a way to, try something. And you're gonna have people that, you're gonna have people that say, listen, I gotta pick something off of the back shelf, instead of them asking, what's in your well? Like, what do you have as your well bourbons? Sometimes there is a gem in the well bourbon category that people just gloss over because they want something that's lit up on the back shelf. listen, I don't care where you put it. All I care about is how much it costs, right? I mean, if I can get it cheaper and better and it's in the well, then give me the well. I'll just pick my well.
I know that
So
for me, like I will usually ask them, like usually, like if
I
I'm going out, because
always,
I have a great understanding of what I like anyway. I'll sit there and I'll say like, hey, what do you got? What do you got in the well? And almost always they'll be like, oh, we got this and got this, and they'll tell me all the things they want, and I'll be like, do you have Knob Creek? And they'll be like, what? Yeah. I think cool. That's the highest proof you got. Bring it, because I know that Knob Creek isn't less than 100, and they're trying to give me something in the low proofs, which there's a place for that, just not for me. And so I'm like, yeah, bring on, like I'm looking for something I know that's good and has some body to it, right? The same way we would with a cigar. You know, I'm going in with a certain palate that day. I want a certain thing. I'm looking for a full-bodied cigar, or I'm looking for a medium-bodied cigar. I already have an idea of what I want that day. So you start developing that as you start to do that. But if you just always start with a palate acclimation, it's a much better experience.
Okay.
that's a great point Sister Leaf just made. Flights are a great way,
Oh yeah,
to get 3 or 4 pours of different stuff, and sometimes you don't have to pay the. You're not looking at like you don't have to go for the pappy $150 flight.
no,
Look at the
no.
flights where they're giving you all bottled in bonds, all small
Oh,
batches.
perfect, perfect.
And that's a great place to start, and it's where you should start. Like I said earlier, Jack said it the best on Saturday. He's like, if you haven't kissed the bottom shelf, you're never gonna appreciate the top shelf.
Right.
You know,
And
yeah,
don't get
you'll
put
think
off by getting a
you
flight. Don't get put off with flights that only have like it might be 3 or a flight of 4 that only have like a half ounce or 1 ounce. That's perfect. Now that you know how to sip and profile, that's quite a lot. I I have sat down and done 3 ounces in 2.5 hours. You know, so you don't have to be like really bent out of shape about it not being like, because a lot of times they'll run a flight that has like 3 1 ounce pours, and you're talking 15-20 bucks. Perfect. I'm getting to try 3 whiskeys. I'm going to try them the way that you've been taught to find out if it's something I like. Therefore, I know that that's something I might want to buy.
Excellent.
If you've
yeah.
ever been to
This is
Riddleman's
such
Gone,
great
that's fine.
information. I hope the people, everybody who came in and watched and hung out, and those of you guys that have been in the chat, I hope you guys pick something up or learn something tonight, because I learned a ton from these two guys. I mean, that's why I wanted these two guys on. They're the best at what they do out there. I enjoy watching their show. If you guys don't watch the Bourbon Battalion podcast, man, you guys, you got to, because it's packed full of a ton of information. So make sure you're following them over on Instagram, because they go live and they get in depth and deep talk and answer your questions.
We try, and listen, we're not going to say that we've got all the answers, right? But we've definitely got enough to point you in the right. If you come out with us with something we've never had, then some we've never had. Fair enough.
Well, and that's also
But
why on Wednesday nights when we do our lives, or when we have off nights, it's because we're bringing people in that have something to share, not only to you but to us. Like Saturday, we wanted Jack on because Jack brings a total different process and different thought, and it's so in depth, and he's so knowledgeable. But he says stuff, and he's an educator as well, which I appreciate educators, because they're able to take something and make it make sense. And Jack is one of the best out there in the market. And he doesn't try to be anything that he is. He's just a guy that likes to get a taste, and that taste triggers a story, and that story triggers fellowship. And then that's where it's at, having a story, But, like he brought up the other day, he's like, someone asked him what it tastes like. He said, it tastes like a hug from mom. And you're just like, what do you mean by that? You just get that warm feeling, and it's just wonderful. So that happens. I can't even tell you how many times I've had stuff like that happen. where you just have this weird story that'll crack, and then you end up in some rabbit hole of just stories, which is perfect.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Man, I loved it. What a
So, I
great
mean,
show tonight. Guys,
Yeah,
I'll
I
hand it over
appreciate
to
it.
you to promote whatever you would like to promote for this evening or for future.
All right. Well,
listen,
our usual show is Wednesdays at 10 o'clock Eastern. We're always on Wednesday, 10 o'clock Eastern. I always post if I have something coming up. I let someone know if we have someone coming on. I try to do it within 24 hours before, sometimes more. It just is. I'm always wait to the last minute because I don't want to post something and then it not happen. So yeah, we usually go out there and we spend time with cigar people, whiskey people, and typically, the idea is people like yourself that are cigar people that want to learn whiskey, or whiskey people that want to learn cigars. And that's where we found our niche, because I was a YouTube guy with Whiskey World, and then I have the cigars, and I was like, Zach, this is what we should do. And we both agreed at the same time. It wasn't like I said it or he said. We both were thinking it because we talk offline so much, and we just like, how
what
do
what
we
we
give everybody a better experience?
well what we found was is there was no one out there. There were times that cigar shows would talk about whiskey, and then there were times that the whiskey shows would talk about cigars. But there's no one that made the concerted effort to do it consistently. Like that was their focus. And that
Right.
is our focus. Our focus is to bring these two communities that we were a part of together so that way we all have a better experience. So
Exactly.
Wednesday nights at 10 Eastern over on Bourbon Instagram. I'm JBHS dad underscore or JBHS underscore dad on Instagram. We just go live on Bobby's channel. Just always kind of made sense because it was already branded. But yeah, man, we would love to see everybody there on Wednesday nights. Danny, thank you again for giving us a platform. Glad that you enjoyed yourself tonight.
Definitely.
If there's anything else you need, you know where we are, and ping us, and we're more than welcome to help out. So,
Wow, well, thank
thank
you
you.
so much. I appreciate you guys taking the time out to come and learn me. It was a great experience. I learned an awful lot tonight, and definitely gonna start in on a new journey that I think I'm really gonna enjoy and probably regret. On that. Next Monday night will be the last show for a while because I'm taking the month of July off. Got Miss Dee Torres coming on, content creator. She's a broker. She sales reps for a lot of different brands out there. She's a wealth of knowledge, especially if you're into the boutique side and small batch side of cigars. She reps for a lot of those companies and brokers for a lot of the smaller shops in the California area. So come hang out with Miss D. I love Miss D. She's awesome, great person. And next Tuesday night, Raw Cigar Reviews will return. We got Greg Free from Fuerte Libre will be our guest, and Brandy Wheat from her cigar closet will be my guest host for that show. So tune in
Awesome.
for that. Yes, D from Social,
Fantastic.
Cigar Lady D there, Joe. She's my guest. She will be on next Monday night. She's the guest, and then I'll see her in a week in Vegas for PCA. So that's it for tonight, guys. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming and hanging out. Thank you to everybody who's in the chat tonight. Loved having everybody come in, and thank you, and a big, big, big thank you to both Bobby and Zach for
Cheers.
helping put this together for me tonight. So we will see you all next week. Take care, everybody.